Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you here to our webinar today, taking floor transitions to the next level in ArcGIS Indoors. Appreciate you joining us. Today is part 2 of a 3-part webinar series put on here by us at CloudPoint Geospatial. And these, the 3-part series, we had the first one back in March. That was how points of interest can enhance your indoor maps. So that was covered at that time. Of course, this one is part 2 of 3. And then part 3 of 3, creating and publishing route networks for ArcGIS Indoors. That's coming October 20th. So my name is John Hodel with CloudPoint Geospatial. I'm the indoors team leader here, and I'm glad to be able to present this series of webinars. And today, looking forward to diving into how we can work with floor transitions. And so let's look at an overview of what we're going to talk about here today. First, we'll review the requirements for the indoors, what's required for ArcGIS Indoors, licensing and what you need there. We will look at setting up the 3D editing environment within ArcGIS Pro in order to properly create your transitions. And then also an overview of what that involves generating the pathways and thinning the pathways, as well as we'll show some examples and really dive into the editing features in 3D on the transitions. So I think will really benefit you for those who are working on ArcGIS Indoors projects and specifically working on creating transitions. With that, we'll jump over into ArcGIS Pro for you here. And what I've done here, first of all, I want to touch on, as we said, reviewing the indoors requirements. I am using ArcGIS Pro, and I am logged into a portal that is using, the portal is licensed for ArcGIS Indoors. So you will either need to be signed into an Indoors enabled portal using ArcGIS Enterprise environment, or you can now use ArcGIS Online, which Esri just about a year ago came up with the ability to enable ArcGIS Indoors on your ArcGIS Online account. So you'll need one of those two to access these tools that we're going to show today in ArcGIS Pro. I'm signed in as a user with publisher status, and I also then have the Indoors database that I created. So just kind of reviewing some of those steps, create Indoors, do a search here for the tool, and I could create a new Indoors database. And that Indoors database will have the ArcGIS Indoors feature classes enabled. So let's take a look at what we've got here in our database to kind of cover that. So we can look at our Indoors sample data here. Let me pull that up and go here into our sample data. And here we can see actual feature data sets. And this is what is created from the default Indoors database. I first have the Indoors data set. And here we have the key areas that we'll be looking at are facilities. We'll be looking at sites, units, points of interest, of course, is very important. Levels is very important that we'll be using, as well as details. We'll be covering a lot of these that we have in our map here that we're going to be working with. And if we pull up our Indoors sample map here, we can see those layers here on the left that I've got some of those as we covered. Details and units. Details be like your walls and doors. Units is your rooms. And then levels, of course, is the whole level of that floor for the building. And facilities is the entire building. And then sites is actually the entire campus that you're working with. So in this case, I also want to touch on these other data sets. We have network, which is your final route network for doing pathways and routing, navigation and wayfinding throughout the building. And then I've also got the, let's go back to look at our preliminary network. This is the network that's kind of in draft format. So you've got your preliminary pathways and transitions there that we can touch on more as we move on. So let's go back to our map here and let's begin talking about what we need to do to set up a 3D environment here. So I have a 2D map. I've also got ranges enabled here. So you can see as I toggle on my range over here, it's toggling floors. And of course, it's changing the floor plan according to that floor that I'm on. If I disable that, turn it off, it's going to show all my floors at the same time, which is really messy and confusing. So we want to keep that enabled for now, just to help us stay organized on what we've got on our data here. But I'm ready to do transitions here, and that's why I've got a stairway here. I've got a multi-floor building. I think we've got about 6 floors here. And I want to begin to connect those floors together with what's called transitions. In order to do that, I am going to need to have a 3D environment set up in a 3D scene in ArcGIS Pro. And how I get that 3D scene is I go to View, and I'm going to convert, and I'm going to convert this to a local scene. Okay. And as this converts this 2D map to a 3D scene, what it's doing is taking into different things in the layer properties. And you'll notice here, as I zoom, let's say zoom to my units on my new 3D local scene, you see some, little discrepancies here maybe on what might kind of look strange, possibly on some of these. A lot of these are just settings that I need to make adjustments to. One of those settings is found in the elevation category under the layer properties. And I can adjust those. So I could say, I want my elevation in 3D to be displayed using a field. In this case, I want to use absolute elevation. And I'm just going to click OK. And you'll notice that now my units actually are showing up correctly. If we do some navigation here, we might be able to see those show up a little bit better here. But I can toggle those from floor to floor. And again, I can see those showing up in my 3D scene, those units being able to show up properly. And if I had, and by toggling that is where I was able to make those show up. So if you convert to a 3D scene, you have issues, the first thing I would suggest is checking your your layer properties under that elevation. You might need to make some adjustments here on what those look like. Okay, so next we want to look at, now that we've got our 3D environment set up, we're gonna be moving back and forth a little bit between the 2D and the 3D environment as we create these transitions. So the range selector, just be aware that this range selector is very, very handy to be able to use. Again, whether you're in 2D or 3D, you want to be able to use that range selector. And how we set that up, whoops, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong map there. How we set up that range, those different levels, is under the properties of the layer. And you can go to range, and then this is where we enable that. We can add a range. So this is looking for a field within your data that specifies what level you're on. In this case, I'm using the one called vertical order, which is pretty typical. I think that's what Esri recommends for using on the range there. Okay. So let's go and look at what we've got here. So you'll notice I've already created some transitions here. This orange line represents my stairway and how someone would walk down that stairway. You can see the purple layer here. I've already created what's called preliminary pathways, and I'm going to turn those on and off so we can see what those look like. It just kind of looks like a lattice, if you will, throughout all the rooms in my building. And what I used was the, if I do a search here for my indoors tools, I used this generate indoor pathways to create those there. And I basically just had to tell it which layer had my levels and my details. And then I just had to define which details it's using for barriers. So like my walls, and I wanted to be able to say, hey, don't want to create pathways through walls, but I do want to create pathways through doorways. Okay, so now I'm ready to, the next step then is I'm looking at creating my transitions. There is a geoprocessing tool available for transitions, and we'll see that right. Let's see, generate floor transitions here. Now, this tool is used to generate transitions automatically by, you tell it which facility you're looking at, and then transition features, the units. So I'm going to tell it, in this case, what I used was I wanted to say, hey, what I'm looking for is use type is equal to stairway. In this case, I think it's down toward the bottom here, stairway. And then I also did elevators. And that way it only created transitions between those unit types. And what it does, if we look at an example here, what it automatically generated is right here, it looks like a dot. But if we go to my 3D view, we will see, if we look at our level, let's go to the one we created here. Well, here we have level 4. You'll see that in this case, that dot is actually it's just a vertical line for my stairway. The problem is that doesn't actually follow my stairway. I want my transitions to actually follow where my steps actually go. So if we kind of navigate here, you can again just see that's just a regular, just a straight line there. Okay. And we need that straight line then to wrap around the stairs. So how I do that is I go back to my 2D drawing, and I have to somehow get this line to start where my stairs go. So in this case, I come through the stairwell door and I go down the stairs this way and around. So I need this transition to snap from the start of the stairways, the stairway right here, snap it there. And then the ending point, I want it to end up right here as we go around. So let's go to our 3D environment here and let's navigate to the right floor. Okay. And we're going to select this transition between these two floors. All right. So I need to select this feature, and I'm going to use my edit vertices. Okay. And then the first end I want to grab and I want to move it, and I'm going to snap it to the top of my stairway. Again, I'm snapping it to a 3D layer, but this is at the proper elevation for where my stairs actually start. Okay, so that's one ending point. And then I'm going to get my other ending point, and I'm going to snap this side to the other stairway where it ends at it's actually going to be, sorry, it's actually going to be the level below this. So you can see it's a little difficult sometimes to edit in a 3D environment, but if we grab that point and let's move it out here just a little bit so we know as I toggle down to the level below, this is where I'm going to want to snap that. As we zoom in a little bit, let's do this. And again, we're navigating 3D, so that can be a little tricky at times. But I want to find that stairway below. Turn off my points of interest there. And turn off the facility. See if we can get things to show up a little more clearly here. Okay, and for some reason, let's try turning off our units there. We can see it a little bit better. It doesn't exactly want to show up too clearly here as we navigate. So let's jump back up to our 4th floor and then down again to our 3rd. Okay, so again, what we're wanting to do is snap this to the level below. And if we go to our transitions, let me do preliminary transitions. And I'm going to open my attribute table here. And let's select that, zoom to. Let's go here. And there's our transition that we currently have. Again, I'm going to select it. Okay, and what I can also do is if I go back to my 2D drawing, I can see that this has now been adjusted. So another thing I can do is actually, I can actually edit this, the vertices here, and I can actually snap it here in the 2D environment. Now, what I'm doing though is if I snap it here, it's going to be at the same elevation. It's going to be on the same floor. What I actually want to do in my 3D view, if we go back here, again, I want to be able to drag this end and snap it to the level below. But you can see it's not really cooperating with me here for the level below that. So we can go up, we'll just go up and show the level above this here. That might make a little more sense. So you can see I've already started a transition here on this level. And if we navigate here, we turn it to the side, you can see that this actually kind of looks like a stairway here. Okay. We started at the top and we went down and across the landing and then down to the floor below. If I toggle on that level below, you can see that that transition. Let's take off our range on our transitions layer. This will help that. Okay. So now I can see that as I navigate down to the floor below, you can see it's connected to the stairway down there below that. And the same if I navigate up again, you can see my stairwells here in my transitions. But how we do those is, again, and first we snap them in the 3D environment. We snap it to the top of the stair steps. Okay, you can see that here. It's a little snap to the point right where the stairs begin at the top level. And then if we look at the level below that, we're snapped to this last step here going down to the level below that. But what's difficult and tricky at times, and I'm just going to move these around here so we can get the idea on what we're doing. I'm going to move these vertices so they're off a little bit. I'm going to do this on purpose so we can select that. And now we can see that it's not exactly following the stair steps, and we're going to fix that. If we look at our 2D map, and we'll go to that proper level. Okay. So this is the one I just edited in there. All right. So I've got, obviously this does not follow the stair steps correctly. And how I fix that, it's easier to work in 2D in this situation when I want to adjust this transition. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to find those vertices and I'm going to zoom in here. And in 2D, I'm going to match my vertices with where that stairway landing is. I'm going to match the pathway there. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm going to slap that in there in 2D, and then I'll accept those. Now, it looks good in 2D. However, I don't know that those are quite correct in 3D. And the reason I can see that if I go here and kind of look at those, you can tell something is not quite correct with my elevations. Okay, see how my landing actually looks like it's on the same floor as my starting point on the stairway. I need to adjust that. My landing needs to be about halfway down between my floors. So rather than try to do that in 3D here, okay, and instead of trying to drag these vertices in 3D and try to figure out where they're at and still maintain my, my 2D information, I'm going to go back here. It's much easier. And this is a little secret to let you in on. If you're going to edit these, do them in this environment 2D, and then you can come here and you can make your adjustments down here on the right in your edit vertices area. So what I'm going to do is just split the difference between these levels. I see my top level is 779.8, and I want to find the difference here. So between that and 764.8, and we'll just do a little math. And we'll say, okay, 7.5 is halfway between those floors, which gives me a result of 772.3. Okay, so I'm going to populate both of these with that elevation 772.3, and I'm going to accept that. And all I did was adjust the height, the Z value of these vertices. And if I go back to our 3D view, we'll see there that this stairway now looks correct. If I navigate in 3D, you can see my landing now is halfway between my levels. And that's what I want. And if I confirm that in my 2D view, it looks correct. It does follow the stairway path there. So that's how we do that, creating those transitions with stairways. It's much easier with elevators. It's just a point snapping to the center of the elevator and snapping to the center point of the elevator below. So it's just a vertical line on those transitions, much easier there. But that's how you create those transitions. And again, working back and forth between 2D and 3D is an absolute necessity to get these correct. Okay. So after that, after we've done some of those adjustments, another thing you might have to use, another tool I just wanted to point out here might be beneficial, is if you look for, it's called Adjust 3D and 3DZ. This is a tool you may have to use on your data in order to get things like the units and the the levels in order to get those to show up correctly. But you do want to have actual elevations on your data so it shows up correctly in your 3D environment. As we see here, if I take off my range view and we start to look at some of those, this is what you should see. Turn off my labels here. This is, if you see something like this, you're on the right track. You start to see your stairwells looking connected there. This you know you're moving in the right direction there when you see your transitions and things line up vertically as well in your 3D environment. Okay. Next, I just want to, before we wrap up here, I did want to touch on the pathways, how we go from preliminary pathways to thin those pathways. We're going to run the thin pathways tool. And you probably noticed I have points of interest enabled here for different rooms and offices, and turn those off. You can see some of those points of interest. What thin pathways does is, if I go to thin indoor pathways, that's going to thin those pathways down so they go from looking like a lattice, it's going to look more like a circuit board. And I believe we have some of those maybe created. I don't think we do actually here in this one, but it's going to take those, going to thin those pathways down. It's going to connect my endpoints on my transitions. So you're not going to have this lattice here. For example, what you're going to find once you thin those is you'll end up with, let's just kind of connect some of these preliminary pathways. You're going to end up with a single pathway that'll come up the stairs, go over, and it's going to come through the doorways, and it's going to have a single path that runs through these areas. It's going to have your hallways are going to be narrowed down to just a single route down the middle of the hallway. So you're going to end up with a much better route network once you thin those pathways. It will require some cleanup, just something to remember. Rarely will you create a route network with generating and thinning pathways without needing manual cleanup. It's almost always going to need some manual cleanup. So just keep that in mind. You also must have points of interest, and your points of interest must have elevations with those. If we turn that on here in our 3D view, you can also see that my points of interest are in 3D, and those match my units there. So just that's it for the most part. Wanted to wrap that up here on those. Again, today we covered reviewing the ArcGIS Indoors requirements, setting up the 3D environment. We also touched on generating and thinning pathways. And we find, with creating and editing floor transitions, we talked about you do need 2D and 3D. So really appreciate you joining us this morning, and just kind of wrapping up. cloudpointgeo.com/webinars is where you can get more information on our webinars, and you can sign up for more of those. Just touching on our services for ArcGIS Indoors, we have facility audits available where our team will come and we can come and do facility audits to look at your facility or your campus to explore the best approach for you migrating your data into indoor mapping, specifically in the ArcGIS Indoors environment. We'll help you look at your CAD, your PDF floor plans, whatever that is, to help you. Maybe you have some BIM data, and we can help with an audit to give you basically a plan of attack on how you want to do that. Whether that's, again, doing the automated tools, doing manual cleanup, but it's a good way to get started with an audit. We also have Kickstart packages available for high impact training, implementation of ArcGIS Indoors. If your organization's looking to implement the indoor solution, certainly our team can help with that as much or as little as you'd like on the training side of things. And then we also offer managed services. If you are looking for outsourcing the maintenance on your floor plans, being able to update your facility maps, kind of the whole turnkey solution, our team is certainly available for that. We provide those services for folks that are looking to take advantage of the indoors capabilities. And this recording, again, is going to be available online for those who were not able to make the webinar. We will certainly have this up and available for folks. So again, we appreciate you joining us today. Any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Here's my contact information. You can reach me at jhodel@cloudpointgeo.com, or you can visit our website, cloudpointgeo.com/contact. Thanks again for joining us today, and appreciate it, and hope you have a good day.